If you are an agency owner who is currently building your team, there's a chance that in the past you may have hired someone who didn't quite turn out to who you thought they would, or there's a chance that one of the hires you're about to make could be the one that stings you a little bit. And I just wanted to say that's not because you are a terrible agency owner. In my experience, it's just because you probably didn't actually know the details of what it was that you were looking for, and you ended up picking the wrong person. I have interviewed thousands of people in my 20s. I worked as a sales trainer and a recruiter for a commission-only door-to-door sales and marketing company. There was no safety net. If I got the hire wrong, it would cost me and the company almost immediately. We had targets, we had clients lining up to wait to work for us, and we needed great salespeople and great team leaders to be able to get enough people out to do the sales for our clients. So it was super important when interviewing, again, to reemphasize for a commission-only role, that I was able to identify great people from even average people to be able to bring the right people in. And that environment taught me 5 things about spotting the right person, which we still use day to day in our own agency and which our recruiters use day to day in their assessing as well. And none of these things are easily visible on a CV or even a screening call. So I wanted to share them with you today. Most founders don't necessarily know what they're looking for. They're spinning a ton of plates already. Their expertise may not lie in recruitment. They may have done a little recruiting before. So they're either relying on a recruiter to tell them that this person's a good fit, or they're just looking for someone that's got the right skill sets, right? Work is coming in, it needs to be delivered, time is short, the urgency to fill the role is super high. So founders just default to looking at the skills a person has. You know, can they get the work done, as opposed to what sort of person is this? What are the qualities that this person has? How are they going to contribute ongoing value to the growth and vision of the company? So these are the 5 things that changed all of that for me. I'm just going to get straight to them and share them with you. So number 1 is do the pre-work before you meet anyone. So often I would just walk into an interview without having prepared for it. I was kind of like, well, the role's the same, so I know what type of person it is that I'm looking for. I know what they need to be able to do. What I found was everyone I would bring in from that would be a B player or a C player. Like, yes, they'd have the capability to be able to learn the sales skills. They'd have some sales background experience. But when it came to doing anything other than just what we told them to do, they weren't capable. So I actually sat down on one day and thought, I need to bring people in who are going to help here. As you know, we've got a bigger sales team. I need to take someone in who's going to start to take some more ownership around that team leadership part. So for that, I needed to think about who was it that we really wanted to bring into the company. So before meeting anyone, I would write down exactly what type of person we wanted to bring in. You know, what are the qualities that this person needs? Not the skills that they need. What are their qualities? What's their approach that we need? What are we looking for? How do we need them to think? How do we need them to behave when they're under pressure? I found that when I started to prep for the interviews became significantly more intentional. Almost like as if you're going to date somebody and you write like a whole dating profile of what this ideal person would look like what they would look like today, what they would look like down the line. Same thing. What's this person going to look like in their first 30 days of working in your company? What's the ideal person going to look like after a year of working for your company, 3 years, 5 years? That starts to really shape who it is that you're looking for. So you don't just sit in front of someone and think, oh, I need them to be able to do SEO or PPC or whatever it might be. I need them to have those skill sets. Instead, you already have a real clear idea of the type of person that you want. Now, when they're sat in front of you, you have a much more holistic picture, much more information around the questions that you can ask them based on this picture that you've created. Right. And I actually remember sitting across from somebody once. I hadn't done the prep, didn't really know what I was looking for, but I hired them because they interviewed well. And within 3 weeks, I knew that I'd already made a mistake. And not because they were necessarily bad at the job. They got the right experience. They were degree educated. They'd worked in sales previously, but they weren't right for this particular role and this particular opportunity. Secondly, the interview, when I started to see it as a sales conversation, not an assessment, it changed everything. So again, where I got most of my experience was when I was hiring for salespeople and team leaders in a commission-only role. And I had to sell the opportunity, right? The people that we were looking for really well educated, really ambitious, really driven people who were looking for an opportunity to advance their sales careers and to lead a team of people and ultimately to manage a client. So when I was interviewing people, I needed to make sure that I was selling the opportunity to them. Right. And this, again, is something that we always do today. I don't just vet people. I sell the opportunity of working with us to them, and I sell the opportunity of working with our clients to them. Because it's super important. If you get someone who cares about their career and who cares about their prospects, they should be interviewing you. That's kind of me jumping onto my third point. But it should be a sales conversation, but you're selling the opportunity to them. Right. Are you understanding what they want from that opportunity? Are you understanding what they want from their life? What are their goals? Does this role that you're interviewing them for, does that solve their pain? Does that help them move towards their goals? If you have a person who gets really excited about the opportunity of working with you and you're selling that to them and they can see how this gets their career to where they want it to go to, or gives them the opportunity that they want, or allows them to progress or travel or whatever it might be, and it's up to you to identify what their goals is and what drives them and makes them feel purposeful in the interview, they'll start fighting for the job. And having someone who is fighting to work in your company versus having someone who just works with you because they need a job and anything will do is a completely different animal and will serve you well for the whole time that that person is working with you. You'll never need to carry someone who fought for the job the way you would need to carry someone who just wanted to get a job, and this one would do. Which kind of leads me to that third point of, I see interviews as a mutual addition. So in my experience, the best interviews will always interview me back. You know, they're excited. We've sold the opportunity to them. They're excited about it. And now they want to probe a little bit more. They're starting to paint that picture in their mind. They can see themselves working for our company. So then they start asking questions. So whenever I say to someone, oh, do you have any questions? I'm looking for them to actually ask questions that are meaningful and relevant to the conversation, not just rehearsed ones, right? If I am interviewing someone and they're pushing back a little bit more, I'm asking them something, or we're in a conversation, they don't really understand what I've asked. I'm asking, I didn't really understand what you just said. Can you explain what you mean by that? Or further, along. Okay, so if we achieved this, then what would happen next? What direction is the company going, right? What are the opportunities here for me? We're wanting them to look at where they're going to focus on the ownership of the role, where they're going to focus on the outcome of the role. And we want them to be asking us, what's their opportunity here, right? And really kind of pushing on that. Performing an interview and going through the motions of an interview is very different to someone who's genuinely deciding if this is going to be the best opportunity for them. And I remember years ago, back in my 20s, when I interviewed this guy, and on paper, I wasn't particularly excited about the interview, right? So I was sitting there, I had his CV in front of me, and I was like, okay, this guy didn't have a ton of experience. He'd worked in the family business for some time. To be fair, he'd been doing sales in the family business. He had a degree in sports science, so not a direct link to working in sales, shall we say. And he came in and he looked a little, he looked professional, but he looked a little underconfident, should we say. And he sat down and I thought, oh, this interview is going to be over in about 5 minutes. But I always want to, try not to prejudge interviews and ask the right questions. And as we started to talk, he started to get really animated. And he started to ask me questions before I'd even kind of finished asking him the logistical questions of how long did it take you to travel here today? And he started to ask me questions, more about the opportunity. And all of his questions were focused on where could he grow to? And as the interview kind of evolved, it turned out that he had 2 young children and he had recently separated from his partner, and he really was really hungry to give his children the best opportunities in their life as possible. Therefore, he wanted to do something meaningful and he wanted to build a career in sales because he associated that with earning a lot of money. And he loved the fact it was commission only because it meant that the earnings were uncapped. So he started to share this with me and share all of his goals with me. I hired him and he, within 6 weeks, became the best salesperson that we had ever had in the whole company, right? Within 6 weeks, because he was so hungry for it. But on his CV, he didn't particularly stand out. On my first impression, it wasn't that strong. But when he started to fight for the opportunity to work with us and he explained his goals and why he was so driven, he was clearly a match. But he really, really pushed for that, and he pushed back on a lot of what I'd said. And it was very much him interviewing me in return to see, is this company going to get me to where I want to get to? So I felt like I had to kind of really justify to him why he should accept an offer from us if we gave him one. Right? And it kind of leads me on to my next point, which is there's 5 signals that we're always been looking for. And if you see these 5 signals, then you know that you found a really, really good candidate. You know, if someone pauses before they answer questions, then you know that they're thinking about it. If they lean in, if you see a physical movement when they're talking to you, if they're actually engaged, they're thinking about what you've said, that's not just them being polite, it's them actually engaging, they're excited about what you're talking about. If they get animated about the work, right, not just the job title, but if they're asking more intricate details about the work, you know, about the performance metrics, about clients that we've turned accounts around for, whatever it might be. If they have certainty, if they know what their ability is and they know how to share that with you through examples, through displaying the way that they think about things, through displaying how they've taken ownership of things before, through displaying a campaign that they've run full cycle, kind of leads me on to my next point. Can they explain the full cycle of something? You know, so for example, can they, if you said to someone, talk me through the last campaign that you ran, right from start to finish, what broke, what did you change, what was the result? You know, where did you take ownership of something in the past? What did you hand off to somebody else? Why did you hand off to somebody else? I want to be listening to what they're thinking about. I don't want to be asking about tasks. You know, how would you set up a campaign? How would you do a brand? How would you set up these AI automations? I don't want to be asking about how they set things up. I don't want to be asking about the skill sets. I want to be listening to how they think about things. A players will give you all of those details, right? They'll give you the way that they think about things, examples of how their way of thinking meant that something improved, or how their way of thinking meant that something didn't improve, but then they learned from that and then they applied it differently and they made an improvement. And again, this is a type of person that I want coming into my agency. And just a couple of examples here of how you can ask the wrong question versus the right question. When I stopped asking, like, can they do this? And started asking, how do they think about this? Everything started to change when I made that switch. So instead of saying to someone, for example, are you proactive? My question would be, tell me about a time that you spotted something when nobody asked for it and you knew it needed to be fixed. What was your approach to that? What did you do about it? Are you detail orientated, for example? Another question that comes up commonly in interviews that I would no longer ask. It would be more like, tell me about a time that you made a mistake, but you caught yourself out on the mistake. How did you catch it and how did you fix it? Right? Another one, you know, can you run a PPC campaign? Again, I'm looking for someone that can explain their thinking, right? So talk me through a campaign that you ran on an underperforming client account, start to finish. What did you do to identify why it was underperforming? What did you change? What involvement did your team manager have, or did the founder of the company have with that? And what decisions did you make on your own? What was the outcome? So all of the questions that I'm asking are focused more around that ownership, more around the outcome, more around the why they did things as opposed to the how they did things, right? And finally, the biggest change for me was in doing that pre-work, doing that prep, getting really clear on the role, really clear on the outcomes of the role, getting really clear of the type of person I wanted to take ownership of the role, writing all of that down and then going into the interview prepared with that meant that I already had a really clear picture of who it was that I was looking for. So I hope that those tips have been useful. If you would like to look any further into the hiring options you have as an agency owner, then I have put together a information booklet, which you can find the link to in the notes from this video. And if you found this video useful, please remember to subscribe to the channel, or like or follow or whatever it is that you do, as I'm going to be dropping one of these weekly, helping agency owners build their businesses with great profit margins and really effective teams.